So, let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes po, ma'am.
So, everyone knows what shapes are, right? Can you give me an example of your shapes? Yes, Catherine.
Circle po, ma'am.
Circle, what else? Give everything. Yes, Kyle.
Hexagon po.
Hexagon, what else?
Trapezoid po.
Trapezoid, okay. Uh, Catherine, Manuel, Marcos,
Icosahedron.
okay. So you gave everything that is not very simple. Okay, all of the polygons are your basic shapes, but the basic shapes, the simple shapes are circle, rectangle, square, triangle, eclipse, diamond, right? Okay. So these shapes are what's going to help you form drawing objects. When in visual arts, this is what they're going to help you draw, and that this would help you draw things accurately and well proportioned. So you could use this with drawing a still life, a landscape, and even a human figure. So it's practically any other object or subject that you wish to draw. So with this is a book actually, and this is it is very very short, so it's not like a book, but they call it a book. So this will help you draw things. So, for example, this is a painting by Paul Cezanne, Cezanne, and um, this is how Paul made it. And then, if you could see here, the artist used shapes to outline or to mock or to try to copy the still life, right? If you could see here how those fruits became circles, and this one became half of a circle, and a triangle with a square, and a cylinder, and all kinds of polygon. And after this, you could actually erase um, the different kinds, the different overlapping lines, and then you can uh, put in different details that would make it look like in the painting itself. Am I clear? Okay. So this is another example. This is the photo reference. And if you could see how the artist copied it by using a cylinder and another cylinder on top, and then another different kinds of uh, sketches or different kinds of shape that would mimic the flowers on top. And then after that, to add more volume or to add more form by using the shapes, some parts were deleted, like this one and this one, and also the guidelines. Those were deleted or erased, and then you add more details like shadows and other things. It's pretty easy, right? Right? Okay.
Yes.
So another example is drawing this vase, for example. So the artist draw a guideline to guide him or her to which is what is center, and then he draw a couple of circles, uh, a rectangle, another ellipse, and then put another circles on top, and that would be the flowers, and then this would be really really light, okay, and then you have to um, add more, erase some parts like this part here, and put in your what do you call this, details, and then your shadows. Then there you have it, your flower and your vase. And that is what you use your shapes for, especially in drawing. It's not just like having shapes as it is, but it is also shapes that would help you make up your composition or your drawing. So later I would, I think I already uploaded this, so you could read it if you want, but I'm just explaining it really, really fast. So why are guidelines very important? So it will help you make things as in symmetry with each other. So if you check art A, compare it to art B, this one is a little bit loopy compared to the B one, right? And what else? It is not very symmetrical to each other. Like, for example, in B, you know that the sides here are in parallel to each other, and also on top and then to the bottom. While this one, it's not, it doesn't even look like a vase, right? It doesn't look like a vase. I don't know what it is, to be honest, especially if you compare it to the art B. But because the artist used guidelines besides with using shapes, he or she was able to make the vase accurately and well proportioned to each side, and it is also symmetrical to each other. If we cut it in half, uh, part the left side would mimic the right side, right? Even it's just in drawing. So the guidelines, the basic shapes are very important, especially if you're not very sure of the proportion and stuff. I mean, nobody is perfect, and we're not a computer that actually could actually just take photographs and mimic the things as they are. We're still human, but we can do it accurately and skillfully as long as we have our techniques, right? And then with basic shapes, uh, we also use it to have form or to add form. So if you could see here, there is a square, and then you use another square and then connect the two. So that is, it gives up your cube. And it is also the same with this cone, I mean cylinder. And you have your clips on top and the bottom and connect it. You have your cylinder. It is also the same with this one, with this box. And the cone, the cone is a little bit different. You have a cylinder at the bottom and a triangle on top. And a prism um, are triangles, three sides, four sides of triangle with a square for the base. So while uh, a sphere doesn't look like a sphere, it looks like a circle. But you could cut the circle, the sphere in half, and it would look like a sphere. Or you could also put shading or tone on the sphere and it on the circle, and it would look like a sphere. So another thing about shapes is when you're doing shapes, you can combine them, especially if the shape of an object is a little bit organic. When I say organic, it is not regular, it is not geometric, and it does not have um, sides, and it does not follow the perfect symmetry of different shapes or geometric shapes. So what you could do is that you can combine geometric shapes or simple shapes to make up your figure. So at the same time, having an axis or a basic or a guideline would also help you to follow the shape or the structure of the object. So for instance, uh, this fruit here, the artist used circle and a weird looking rectangle on top. And then with the help of the axis, the artist added a stem here. And you could see how the artist followed the axis, right? And for example, this one, in this axis, the stem is not straight or it's not in the center. So the artist also put the stem not on the center. And if you raise the guide shapes, the guidelines, you can start filling in the the shadows or the other details, and then voila, there is your fruits, right? It's easy, right? And furthermore, you could also combine shapes, especially when you're drawing a net organic one. So you have this vase, for example, you have a half of the cone, two halves of the cone, and a cylinder. And then this one, this is a weird looking vase. And you could use a circle, eclipse, and a half of a cone, and a triangle on top, and then a weird looking C. And then erase this one and fill in your details, and there would be your vase. So that's simple, right? So when sketching a group of objects, what you're going to do is just follow the same. But it would be much harder in a sense that you're going to add more shapes, right? And these shapes are supposed to be proportional to each other. So, for example, this group of cats, you can see the artist used cylinder. So, well, it looks like cylinder anyway. And what the artist did is just draw it and then add more shadows. You can even add more eclipse here and had more lines here and stuff to make it more realistic. But you get my point. That is how easy it is. And another example is this fruit again. I don't know why um, the artist like this kind of fruit, but anyway. You have to use different kinds of circles here and stuff. And also, the important thing with having an axis, for example, makes you see where the food should be lying in. For example, this axis or this guideline shows how the pumpkin is lying slightly to the left and how this big fruit here is lying to the right and the other fruit is lying to the left. And that is the how you use your axis. And also the axis also help you determine your uh, light source. For example, the other half should be bathed in light and the other half will be bathed in shadows or tone, and the other side there would be your shadow. So that is the use of axis. So that ends our basic shape lecture. That was really short. Do you have any questions for me before we go on to the next? None? None. All right. Um, so let me just. So our next lecture would be forms. So why forms? So forms are very, very important because without form, your wait lang. Without form, your shapes or your objects would look two-dimensional and it won't look very realistic. So when you say form, it is the three-dimensional of shapes. It's what makes the shape have mass, have weight, have volume. So that is the use of your form. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Lang makate. Form. Mhm. So form is a visual element that refers to the illusion of three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface. So if your painting looks flat and uninviting, it means that you used poor form. So um, so when you say 2D, that those are your shapes. And if you refer to 3D, that is your form. So form is not also only 3D, but sometimes it could also refers to 4D objects like a sculpture, a building. So that is your form. So when you say form, this makes your shape have length, width, and height. And then you also have this dimension factor, which is depth. So form can be real and applied. So in sculpture pieces, the form is real because you could touch it, and sometimes you could also put something in it in terms of faces and other things. In drawing and painting, the form is applied or implied because you cannot actually put something in it. It doesn't have depth. The depth is an illusion. So therefore it is implied. And how do you put form in a shape or in a 2D object? You put shadows, highlights, different kinds of tone. So that is your how you put form. So major forms, you have your basic shapes, right? Like sphere, circle, square, triangle, rectangle, what else? And other kinds of polygon, you have those kinds. But with forms, you have two different forms, two different kinds. You have geometric forms and organic form. With geometric form, there are they are mathematic, mathematical in nature, and organic forms. These are your forms created by nature. Um, those are those are wavy and cannot be computed by in a simple way. So geometric forms are most of the time man-made, and artists use the effects of light and modeling to produce them. So these are geometric forms, like I said, sphere, cylinder, cube, cone. But when it comes to visual artists, especially the painters, those who draw, artists used to um, attempt this to attempt to draw it representationally. They need to understand the effects of light on the object, and in turn, this would help them create an illusion of form. So, for example, with forms, you have a highlight, mid-tone, reflected light, cast shadow, and core shadow. So, what is a highlight? A highlight is a part of the object where the light hits it directly. The mid-tone is the true color of the object. So, for instance, the color here is gray. That's the true color. And then the cast shadow, this is your shadow, the darkest shadow that is resulting from the light. And the core shadow, this is the area of the shaded area of the object. That is the core shadow. And then the reflected highlight, that is a light that is reflected or light that bounces from the object, for example, a wall or a mirror that bounces from that object to the object that we uh, we see. Do you understand? Okay, wait, let me turn. So organic forms, they have no thematical they have no mathematical structure. They are irregular and random by nature. They also have length and width and height, pero they are not angular, and the construction are not very strict. They can go up and down, and if it's in 3D, you can see that it has a lot of points, it has a lot of angles, and it doesn't it is not very strict. And when you draw something with a form, it is most easy to actually draw geometric form rather than the organic forms. Because geometric forms are simplified, and when you and also you could draw organic forms by combining different kinds of geometric forms. In that way, drawing geometric forms would be easier, and yeah. So I am. So example, this is a sculpture by Hans R. And this is organic forms like these are more free, they're random. It is most of the time organic and can also be an ident and cannot be copied to one another. For example, your branches, your leaves, your clouds, your mountains, those things cannot be copied, right? Your thumbprint, those cannot be copied, and those are organic forms. And that these forms are, surprise, a birth of is helpful during the birth of the abstract sculpture also. So what is the difference of shape and form? Like I said, shape is flat, it is enclosed, while form appears three-dimensional, and most of the time it is something that you can hold your hand, or rather it looks like it is something that you could hold in your hand. And then what with so if a sphere, for example, would have no form, it will have no perspective, it will have it will look like a circle. A cube without a form would look like a square. A cone would look like a triangle, and a cylinder would look like a rectangle. So that is how useful your form is. So if you could see here, perspective, this is shading or perspective. So ayan. So that is how you use form or how you put form. And like what I said, a shape is a simplified version of a form. So if you're able to see the basic forms through all the noise, you would also be able to paint a more convincing image if you have a better feel and understanding of the object. So drawing forms is not so easy. That is why most of the time we use basic shapes to help us draw different kinds of forms. Just like what I showed you earlier with the vases, the fruits, that is also applicable in all things like the face, the mountains, the um, a ball, the buildings, and other things. So, but not everything needs to be painted with a sense of form. Of course, there are actually areas that are flat. For example, the floor, the wall, what else? The mirror, building, and also distant objects. You don't need to put distant. You don't need to put form on a distant object. Kasi the closer the object, the more apparent the form is. When um, distant object tends to be more blurry, and they tend to be um, so small that a shape is just okay to be put on a distant object. And other areas that you want to appear flat, for example, like a distant figure walking in the background, so or other parts of your composition that you want to put less emphasis in or less contrast, you can put it as flat. So not everything in a painting should be uh 3D. Sometimes it is okay to have it flat. Otherwise, everything would look like it's going to explode. So, training. How you see basic shapes and form is something that you need to actively train, right? You will need to learn how to tune the vast amount of noise and information so that the basic shapes and form will remain. So again, this is a training on how you see the world. So like I said before, you have to train your mind to see things objectively and subjectively. So with artists, you have to analyze things, analyze what you draw, analyze what you see, and then put it on paper. It's just not enough that you unknowingly or subconsciously just draw it as it is. With fine arts, because you're studying visual arts, you have to also understand the logic and the science behind it. And that when you're um, looking at something and you're copying something, you have to understand that, for example, this ring light is looks like for example, this ring light. This ring light um, looks like circle, and then there is a little um, triangle for the tripod. So you have to think like that. It's not just it looks pretty and stuff. You have to have a basic structure on how to build your composition, and that the shapes, the form will help you do that. Especially when you want to draw something that is proportion to each other. When I say proportion, for example, a window should not be as big as the door, for example. You have to use basic shapes, basic form to build up your composition or the elements of your composition. All right? All right. So another example, for example, is this drawing. This drawing by Albert Durer. So if you can see this feet, it's just feet, but you could see how he used basic shapes and basic form to um show to help him draw the feet. You could see that, and then you could also even add little sausages or circles here, or you could also add it differently, like you could have this in circles, and this big um thing here could also be a circle, and this could also be a triangle and another triangle. So that it depends on you. So learning the basic shapes or learning to draw the basic shape is not um is not set in stone. It is up to you, and it is also, as I said it before, it is how you see different objects that you put it on your paper or your artwork. All right. So another example is this one. This is a painting by Edward Manet entitled The Plum. So if you could see it here, this is a lady, right? But you could see how um, the basic shapes can be used to construct the portrait. For example, the hand, you could use a cone or different kinds of sausages, for example, to help you make the hand. And for example, the head here could be a sphere, right? And the hat would be like a half sphere or a rectangle, and that's up to you. So that is how you use um, your basic shapes. Another example is this one. This is a painting by Ivan Chinskin, Oak Lit by the Sun. This is the original painting, but if you want to use your basic shape, if you will use your basic shape, you could put triangles, rectangles, or a cone to mimic the shape of the tree, right? Okay. And this is an organic form, this is a photo, but you could also use basic uh basic what you can basic geometric forms to help you use it, just like this one. You can see it here. This is the original portrait, and you can see there the outlines are organic, but you could cut it in different parts. This is really weird since it's a cow, you have the beef. But you could cut it in different halves, and you can put like this one here. You could use a cone. This one could be cube, a cube, and sausages, and different kinds of circles as well. So that is how you do your basic shapes, or use your basic shapes to use into form. So how do you depict form? In order to make a 2D object look like 3D, you have to put shadows, you have to put light, and that this is the most very effective technique out there. So the thing is, you have to understand lang where is the light facing. Like if the light is facing, or if the light is from the left, then the shadows will be to the right. And that is constant with that theory, unless there would be a reflected light. So, for example, this one, everything from here is illuminated and the rest is in the dark. For example, the back, even if this is closer to the window, the back here is darker, but the rest that is facing to the window is lighter. And oops, what did I do? So let me zoom it out for you. So there. See, everything that is facing to the window is lighter, and everything that is um, behind the window is darker. And even this is 2D, you could see that it looks real because it has a form. And how do you imply the form? You use shading and highlighting technique. So how do you put basic shapes again? The artist this time used cube and a series of boxes. Okay, it also depends on you if you're more comfortable with using sausages, so or a combination of both. It's actually the result that is, um, or it is actually the outcome that is, um, it is the outcome that is um, more important than how you do it. So this is by Gustave Caillebotte. I don't know. And the painting is titled The Parquet Flower Planners. So hard to depict form, you have to ensure that cast shadows are accurate and present. So do you remember what cast shadows are? Huh? Guys? No? The cast shadows are the shadows that is not, but this is the core shadow. The core shadow is the shadow, the darkest point of the shadow inside the object, and the cast shadow is the shadow that is facing away from the source of light. So if this is the light source, then your cast shadow should be here. So without the cast shadow, just like in this picture, it looks like the sphere is actually floating in space, right? But if you put a shadow here, it would look like um, this ball or the sphere is actually resting on a table or something or a plane, not on space. And that is also correct with other things like a person walking. If a person doesn't have a cast shadow, it would look like he is floating or something like that. Contour lines also are very important sometimes, but there are artists who doesn't do contour lines, especially the impressionist artists and the fauvism. But for some artists, in order to employ a realistic image, they use contour lines to reiterate the form. So you use your brush to go around, under, and over the form. And the contour lines would, what the contour lines would do is that it's going to emphasize the shadows, or it's going to make the darkest part of the the object or the figure more emphasized. So if you can see here, this is dark, and then suddenly it becomes loose. So it gives a little bit flair to the painting or the artwork. And in this instance, the it actually looks like this hand is shaking, right? So that is how he also used her contour lines. And at the same time, you could also use texture to put form. For example, in using or in making landscapes, you could use thick green to um, indicate leaves, or thin paint for um, the clouds or the water here. So, and that is the use of texture. For example, this one. So you can see how this is very smooth, and then suddenly there is a little bit texture here. How wispy lines shows the how farther the this part is, and this is much more near, right? And then you could also use different kinds of color to reiterate the form. So it's just like putting the shadows and the highlights, except with this one, you use different kinds of tone or hue to showcase, to put depth of your figures or on the painting. So usually you use cold colors to make it to make the figures go back or recede from the background, and warm colors to make it more um, more emphasized or above the background, or forward in the background from the background. So again, here are your basic shapes, how you employ the basic shapes. So a little bit warning is that when the figure is wearing clothes, you also have to think about what is going underneath the clothes. For example, you have a leg here, for example. So you have to think about that leg and not just draw a square, for example. You have to also think about that this person has a leg, and you have to incorporate that into the figure. So just like this one has a square, and even if she is wearing a skirt, the artist tried to incorporate the leg, right? So tips on drawing the perfect sphere, cube, cylinder, and cone. You have to practice um, drawing different kinds of form, and especially the basic forms, because basic forms are usually a warm-up exercise, and that when you master your basic form, you could simply use this reference photos for to copy your painting, your references. You could incorporate this in your figure drawing and your practice. So, ayan. So, references, you have your draw, paintacademy.com form. So, do you have any questions for me? None? Are you sure? Are you sure? So, wait lang. Let me look at. So, for when is it? For 17th of September, it's going to be an asynchronous class, and I'm going to assign you another activity. All right. But wait, before that, I'm going to stop recording. All right.